Hi, my name is Des Libby. I'm in 6th period beginning photo. I am doing a project on the history of photography, and it's a podcast. Here we go. First date, 1835, daguerreotypes. Daguerreotypes were a type of photo that was started by Louis Daguerre, and he was partnered with Joseph Niepce and his son. Joseph Niepce was the first person to take a photo, like a real photo, but it had an 8-hour exposure time, so the picture itself doesn't look that great, and it was printed on metal plates. Daguerre liked this idea of the metal plates, but instead of using pewter, which has lead in it, he decided to use silver. But the process is still the same with the iodine fumes. In 1839, Fox Talbot. See that? You'll understand that in a moment. Fox Talbot, he started doing photos as well in January 31st, 1839. The daguerreotypes lasted from 35 to 39. They had lifetime pensions, they got published. The exposure time went from 20 minutes to 1 minute, but you couldn't make copies. Fox Talbot wanted a system where you could make copies. So he started printing on paper, not metal. He was the first person to do this. His pictures also came out negative positive. So it came with a reverse image that you could take, that you could blow up, you can shrink, you can make different sizes of, and you can make multiple copies of. This changed the direction of photography for the rest of the time that photography's been used. Oh, by the way, the x-ray right here, the bone with the finger, Fox Talbot was also the first to discover that you could take x-ray pictures of, like, people. You could see the bones in their fingers, in their chest, their head. It changed medical sciences as well as photography itself. 1851, wet plates are invented. And this little drawing right here will make sense momentarily. In 1851, Frederick Scott Archer creates the wet plate process. The wet plates came out as negatives, so you could make copies of them. They were covered in the plates themselves were glass, and they were covered in a wet coating of certain chemicals that were they were light sensitive, unlike the glass itself, which is why they were coated. Because the wet plates were light sensitive, there was a shorter exposure time. But there's a few downsides. The wet plate had to be prepped in the dark, and it had to be used within 10 minutes of the prep time. But this is when we start seeing photos of battlegrounds, such as Civil War. The Civil War was extensively photographed. Because of such short time, though, that you could use each plate, you only see really pictures of the aftermath. And they had to have a mobile darkroom in order to take these photos. Hence, the doodle. It's a mobile darkroom. Moving right along. 1871, dry plates are invented. Dry plates were created by Richard Maddox 20 years later, and instead of using the wet chemical coating, which you had to be really, really careful with, they created a gelatin coating. So you were able to use them in the light. You could take them with you places because you didn't have to have a mobile darkroom. So instead of only being able to take places in like battlegrounds or portraits, you could take these out into the wilderness and take pictures of trees. And they were made in controlled conditions, meaning they could be factory made. So they were open to the public. Anybody could acquire them if, you know, you had the camera and the money. Let's see. Next in our timeline, we have the bet. In 1878, people used to bet on horse races. Now, there were some people who believed that horses had at least one hoof on the ground at all times while they were running. But someone, former governor of California, Leland Stanford, said, no, that's not correct. There is a point in time when horses have all four hoofs off the ground while running. So they decided to hire Edward Muybridge. He was a photographer, and he helped prove Leland right. He set up a series of, I think, 24 to 27 cameras along this row of the horse track, and each one took a picture as the horse ran by. And you can actually see in two of the pictures that the horse's hoofs are off the ground. So Leland wins the bet, and this is when we start taking action shots. And this also leads to motion pictures, which really begin in 1891 with the kinetoscope. The kinetoscope was basically a machine for the first motion pictures. It was invented by Thomas Edison, and what it would, on a side note, first video ever made was of a sneeze. Really short, and it takes a lot of film which zigzag like this all up and down and around. So you can only imagine how much film is used for, say, a 2-hour movie as opposed to a 5-second movie. Just saying. But it was a way to view the first motion pictures. It had it was basically a box that came up about chest height, and it had a viewing station that you put your face in, kind of like it kind of went like that, and it blocked out all the light so that you could see the moving pictures. And then our more modern cameras. In 1885 to 1900s, Kodak became known to the public. Now, Kodak was photography for all. It was a way to get cameras to every person who could afford one so they could take their own pictures. So the 1900s, early 1900s is when you start seeing photos of people. And it was the first roll film. It was created by George Eastman. It was originally called the Eastman Dry Plate and Film Company, but that was eventually shortened to Kodak. Where they got the Kodak? I don't know. But the first camera that they created was called a Kodak. It was the Kodak camera. and they wanted people to buy these cameras. So they came up with the slogan, "You press the button and we do the rest." The price was $25, which is equivalent to the $600 cameras that we use in photography now. It's a lot of money for 1900s. $600, like, not everybody has $600 just laying around. It was preloaded with film, and say the film had like 24 film slots on it. All you had to do was mail it back to the Kodak company, and what they would do is they would develop your pictures, put a new roll of film in, and send it back to you with your pictures. So you only had to buy the camera once. But in 1900, Kodak came out with the Brownie, which is pretty much a little box camera. And the price was $1. And it came out with small square prints, as opposed to the Kodak camera, which had round photos, or like little round photos. It was 90 cents to develop 24 pictures. So you buy the camera for $1, use it as many times as you want, and all you gotta do is pay about $1 to get your 24 photos back. This is about the equivalent of like a $24 camera, maybe 25. And the brownies, just an interesting side note, there's these little creatures called brownies. They're mythical creatures. They're like little elves, and they are said to help out the household, like doing little chores at night, cleaning up here and there. If you leave them like fruit or a saucer of milk or something, brownies will help you. Brownies are cute. They appeal to children. Children want brownies. Children want cameras. So it was just a marketing technique. Hence the Kodak Brownie. And I do believe that is the end of my presentation. So, thank you, and I hope you learned something.